One. Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Gemini on the 8th of December. Although, of course, it will be the 7th of December if you're born west of Greenwich. The full moon occurs at 9 minutes past 4 in the morning, UTC, so you can do the math to get it to exactly when it happens where you are. And in fact, when we look at the chart of this full moon, I've set it from Kiev so that we can see exactly what that full moon will be doing. It'll be just in the dawn sky, in fact, the early dawn sky. So this full moon isn't a super moon, so it's not going to loom particularly large in the night sky, but it can be a very pretty moon in the northern hemisphere because, of course, it comes of winter. The Native American Mohawk tribe call it the full cold moon, the Cherokees the snow moon. And if you do catch it and there's a frost draping the landscape, it can be rather magical, and I kind of like that. My astrological mentor, Ingrid Lind, who was the president of the Faculty of Astrological Studies, used to call this moon the Christos Moon, which I also love. And I always think about this being the Christos Moon. It falls just around Christmas, so it celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ. So for all these reasons, this is a rather kind of inspiring full moon. I have used the word magical and also spiritual already. And you'll see as we go on through this video, those words do keep coming up. Now, another thing about this full moon is that the sun is in Sagittarius, the moon is in Gemini, and both these signs are what I would call seeking signs. They seek knowledge and understanding and experience in their kind of different ways. So you could loosely say that this full moon, if it has a general effect, it's about communication, it's about exploration, and it's about synthesis as well. So that each of us at the time of this full moon and in the waning cycle should think about our experience and try to synthesize it. On the one hand, using the moon in Gemini to find some kind of logical appraisal of what's going on. And if we flip into the Sun Sagittarian sign, and we're trying to find meaning, we're trying to find purpose, something that's a little bit more. We're going to be making journeys in miles, in experience, in knowledge, and in spiritual things as well. That's why this full moon is kind of special. Another thing to bear in mind is that this full moon ends a chapter that began on the new moon in Gemini on the 30th of May. Now, if you think back to that period and into the first couple of weeks of June, during the waxing cycle, events may have happened, you may have begun something, so it has its natural conclusion on or around the 8th of December and the waning cycle of the moon, which goes through to just a little bit after Christmas. So what began at the 30th or around the 30th of May has its completion date of let's say, the 8th of December. So let's have a look at this full moon in terms of what it looks like in the horoscope. As you can see, I've set this particular full moon from the perspective of Kiev, or Kiev, as we call it now. And I think Kiev is in all our thoughts, and it's certainly in my thoughts as I record this video because of what's been happening in Ukraine in the past few days. I'll come to that really at the end of my video, my conclusion. So we can see here the sun in Sagittarius in the first house, just below that 9 o'clock position, and the moon in Gemini just above the descendant. So we're still looking at it, we're able to see it in the night sky. You know, it's coming into the night, as it were. And what you can also see from this is that it is up close and personal to Mars, a matter of minutes away. So this is a full moon conjunct Mars. So it's a very fiery, fiery full moon. It's not only Mars that we're interested in, though. We're also interested in Uranus, because Uranus is 15 degrees of Taurus, so it's picking up on that degree area. And if we look a little bit further around the chart and we come to Neptune in the 5-6 o'clock position, that at 22 degrees of Pisces is also caught up in this full moon. And during the course of the day of the full moon, the moon will square Neptune. That's why we say this full moon is conjunct Mars and square Neptune. And it's also hooked up to Uranus by semisextile and quincunx. The sun quincunx Uranus, the moon semisextile Uranus. And when we put those things together, we not only get fiery, we also get explosive, we get confusing, we get chaotic. There are sort of various kind of ranges of all of this, because when we think about it, if something is explosive, it's just like it's electric, it's having a terrific spark, it's like awakenings on sticks, so we quite like that. On the other hand, we don't like to think of things catching fire or, you know, going up in smoke, which are other expressions. But that's this kind of full moon. And because you've got Neptune in the middle of that as well, we do end up with chaos, confusion, and muddles, although we also get magic and mystery. We also get divinity. We get those kind of moments of great compassion and spirituality and soul-to-soul moments, and that understanding that we're all, you know, souls in search of a life of experience, if you like. And you'll also notice as we look at Neptune in this position here, it's close to Jupiter. It's, you know, 8 degrees away. It's slipping away as well. Jupiter is moving forward. It's going to enter Aries in a matter of days, but it's still implicit. We've still got, you know, Jupiter and Neptune quite close together, and they're in the same sign of Pisces. And I think we look at this 8th of December, not too far from Christmas. Everything is rather magical as you walk through the streets and all the lights are up and you've got Christmas carols and all those kind of things make us feel Christmassy. And we've got the magic of Christmas in our astrology here, but we cannot just leave it at that. We have to remember that Jupiter and Neptune can be very, very chaotic, and that there can be a real expansion of chaos. As opposed to something good and beautiful, we get something that we really can't handle. And all of this must be put into the times that we're living in, according to the factors in our horoscope. Now, what's also important in regard to Neptune, and makes Neptune a really important figure on our astrological landscape, is the fact that Neptune turned stationary direct, or will turn stationary direct, depending what date you're looking at this video on. It will do that on the 4th of December. And when you get a planet that's stationary, it is super powerful. Its influences is extra strong. So at least a week before that and a week after it, and certainly at the time of the full moon, we have Neptune in full bloom. So all its good divine sides are in full glory, as well as its more chaotic side as well. The other things to look at here, if we can see just below the sun, we can see Venus, 27 degrees of Sagittarius. That's going to head into Capricorn on the 10th of December. And we're also going to be looking at both Mercury and Venus angling and squaring Jupiter. So that's also a very jubilant kind of influence, typical of the season, generosity, the joy to all good men, so to speak. But it's also a fairly inflationary one as well. So we have to be careful to do things in moderation and not to let everything get out of control, anything and everything. Last but not least, on the 14th of December, the sun will square Neptune. So in all this time, as you look at this horoscope, Neptune is fundamentally all powerful, and we get the best and worst from this planet at this time. So let's come back to me again. And now let me take you through sign by sign what this full moon actually means or represents to your sun sign. Or if you know your ascendant, you've got your chart, you'll know that the sun is in one house and the moon is in the other. So we'll cover all those bases. Well, if we start off with the moon in Gemini, of course, and we start off with Gemini, then the moon will be in your first house. And one of the features about having the moon in your first house, this is a very personal area of the horoscope. It's the me. How do I look? How am I coming across? What am I all about out in the world? And so this full moon is both empowering in the sense that your emotions and your will can be harnessed to empower you to do certain things. And that's important to remember, particularly on the full moon day, which means 7th, 8th of December. And of course, the moon will move on from there in the waning cycle. So we also need to look at where the sun is. And the sun, of course, is making its journey through the 7th house at the moment. So we're into the whole area of relationships. So the full moon is also about relationships, or a relationship in particular. And let's put those words together, closure and completion. You get to seal the deal. You decide you're going to be together, or you sign a contract with a company, or you decide to work as a business with someone. All these things, signing a deal, closure and completion. But it can also mean it's the end. You're done. That's the end of the contract. That's the end of the affair. That's the end of it. And it may not come exactly on that date, but that's what it's symbolizing, an ending. And remember, we've got Mars hooked up in this. We've got Uranus and we've got Neptune. So you can imagine it's probably a very fiery ending, or one that comes about in extraordinary and very mysterious circumstances. But certainly if you're closing a deal and you're deciding to make that relationship permanent, then what you've got is this degree of magic and jubilation around that particular time. Now, if we look at Sagittarius, we've got the opposite. We've got the moon in the 7th house. So the moon is only going to be there for 2 or 3 days, but it's important because, as I spoke a little while ago about Gemini, we're on the relationship axis. And so things that happen around that full moon time are probably going to make a difference to a relationship. It can be a tipping point. Maybe you've been struggling with a relationship and the full moon comes along and ups the emotional ante, and there you are having a real argy-bargy with someone. Is it enough to say, that's it, sayonara? It might be. Or is it just one of those things and you move on, perhaps a little wiser because of it? But again, keep remembering as we approach that full moon, the combination of all those other factors, Neptune, Mars, Uranus, and we know that this is a tricky time. Things are a little bit trigger happy. So if you can hold that thought, probably a good idea. Remember, the sun is in your sign, Sagittarius, so you're in a period where you really do want to get ahead with things. You do want to exert your influence on situations. That is how it should be. You need to take the power into your own hands. But when we get to that full moon time, that power is split because someone else has equal power in your life. So it's just time to listen, to share, to compromise, to come to understandings, not really to fire up with both guns and bring a speedy end to what was a perfectly okay relationship. If we come to Pisces, we've got the full moon in the 4th house. And of course, that is the same if you've got Pisces rising, moon in the 4th house, and the sun in the 10th house. So the sun is making its long journey through the 10th house, which is the area of life goals, ambitions, career, your role in life. It's a pretty, big transit, this one, because a lot of things come together at this time. You lay down plans, you talk to superiors about your job, you get new jobs, you get things happening in relation to your job. It's your place in the world. It's your identity to a lot of people. What you do for a living is what identifies you, or your role in the sense of being a mother or a father, a daughter, a son. Those things also define us. So this full moon is about the definition of that role and things happening in regard to it. And we've got a full moon, so it's closure, completion. It's a done deal. So we could be looking at here the end of a job, for instance, that it is something you already know about because you're going to be moving on to something else, or maybe you're retiring. But it can also be the end of a chapter on the home front. Now, does that mean that there are changes in who lives in the home you're in? Are there going to be comings and goings? But of course, we're coming up to Christmas. So of course, there are all sorts of things happening to do with family at this particular time. Could it be that you're ready to move house or ready to make some moves regarding your home? And that can mean renovation, decoration, refurbishment, all those kind of things, which of course is often what we do around Christmas because people are coming over. And I suppose also it's a time that you might want to get lots of goodies in, and you might want to cook and create beautiful things. So that full moon is a real focus on the domestic circle. But let's forget Mars, Uranus, and Neptune. You're going to have to keep your focus and keep your cool around that full moon time. If we come to Virgo, we've got the moon in the 10th. So this is a kind of temporary thing, a sort of 3-day event while the moon tours that part of your horoscope. But the sun is firmly in that 4th house and has been for a little over 10 days, maybe. So it's plodding through that 4th house. So your focus should be on home and family, things to do with the roots of life, and even, in a way, ancestors. So perhaps if you're doing an ancestry search, you might say, oh, of course, the sun is going through my 4th house. Or it may be that you've got all sorts of arrangements with family for the holidays coming up. Maybe you're having people to stay, so you've got to, create a space for them. There'd be all sorts of reasons why the sun moving through the 4th house is all about the home itself, the family, and the things that go on in the home. But hey, this is a full moon, closure and completion. It may have something to do with what's going on in the world out there. Is that going to have an impact on your plans? Is there something that happens in the world that means something's got to be delayed, changed, moved around? It may do. But it's the same thing really in reverse, as I've just been talking to Pisces about, that it might be the ending of a job, whether that was a temporary job or you've been in some part of a company, for instance, and you're ending that bit of work and going somewhere else in the company, or it could be that you're retiring or ending a job and you're facing a new chapter, really, which will be epitomized by the new moon when it comes up in a couple of weeks' time. Again, let's not forget that the climate of the times is a little unstable, so there will be an element of the unexpected to the developments around the time of the full moon. If we move on to Taurus, and we're going to do our group of fixed signs now, we find the moon in the 2nd house and the sun in the 8th house. So during this time, since the 21st, 22nd of November, right through to about the 21st of December, the sun is moving through your 8th house. So it's a good 4-week period, 30 days. And when we think about that 8th house, it has a lot to do with money, but not really the money that you earn, the money that comes to you, the money you share. So you can share finances with your partner if you're in a relationship. And of course, we have financial relationships with banks and lending institutions, credit card companies, business partners, all those kind of things. So this period is all about sorting out those financial arrangements. And it may mean you're working through an inheritance or a settlement is due, and all of this is happening anyway around this time. Then we get the full moon coming to it. So the moon is in the second house and it reaches a climax. So we've got a done deal. You know, those monies you're expecting come in, the arrangements you're making with partners or institutions, they're done too. There are signatures on paper. That full moon is good at closing. However, it can be the reverse. And what you have instead is a kind of crisis over finances. And that can happen because we're not keeping a close eye on what's coming in and what's going out. But it can also happen because there's something we didn't know about. Maybe a transaction has gone through twice, or maybe somebody has scammed us. So that full moon can really cause a bit of a financial crisis. But there's also this idea that you can also do a deal on your own income, so that if you've been discussing salaries or something related to what you've got to sell, a house even, or even just a piece of an item of property, then you can do that deal and sign on the dotted line. But remember, on the day itself, and perhaps a couple of days surrounding it, the day before, the day after, it's going to be a little kind of flaky. There's an edge to everything, and it won't take much to sort of knock something sort of off its perch. So coming to that Taurus with that kind of attitude is going to help you move through this period successfully. Now, if we come to Scorpio, the sun is moving through your second house. So the full moon is in the 8th house. And that's the same if you have, Scorpio rising, for instance. So this is a long, extended period where you need to be thinking about making money, making investments. And also it's really about the value you represent to other people. Now, the easiest way of looking at that is if people want to pay us lots of money, we feel full of value. And if people aren't paying us enough, then we feel we're worth more than this. Why aren't we being paid enough? So it's a very simple kind of allegory of what goes on in the second house. But of course, the important thing is what value we place on ourselves. I mean, when we feel full of value, because we know what we do and who we are as a person of value, we're much better at negotiating our position, whether it's a salary or something else, because we feel strong. We can't be just sort of knocked about by someone else's statements or opinions of us. We're pretty rock sure about our own value. So come a full moon in the 8th house, then you get people making judgments about what you do, what you earn, how much value you are, what you're worth in terms of finance. It can be a delicate time for negotiating any kind of settlement or working with an inheritance or with banks and credit card companies and those kind of things, because if you're doing it on the full moon, everything is a little bit more stressful. Then remember, that full moon is conjunct Mars, connects to Uranus and Neptune. So you've got a perfect kind of storm. If you get into difficulties or there's some kind of issue about something, it'll be easy for that to get exaggerated. So keep your cool, Scorpio, at the time of that full moon, day before, day after. Remember, everything's a negotiation. And if you just keep telling yourself that, you will negotiate your way through this full moon. If we look at Leo, then we've got this full moon in the 11th house, and we've got the sun in the 5th house. So with the sun moving through that 5th house, then we are in a very creative, a kind of an enjoyable period of the year. And what is this period of the year if it's not meant to be a time when we should be celebrating? So you've got the sun really in a very good place, during this period of time. This is a part of the chart that has to do with creativity in all its forms. So it's not just, making the house look pretty for Christmas and doing creative things with the kids for their nativity plays or carol concerts and all of that, which is lovely. It's about procreativity. So for some Leos, this is about getting pregnant. It's about dealing with young babies, expecting a birth. Let's not forget, this is a full moon, so it's the end of a gestation period. So maybe it is signaling a birth in the family, your own expected birth. And that's a wonderful thing to celebrate. And also, if we think about a gestation period, and remember I talked about May the 30th, and around that time beginning something. If, let's say, you began a romance about that time, then here we are, December the 8th, around that time. Where has that romance got to? Is it ready to go to the next stage? Is something happening that means you're now a real item? Or does it mean you've taken this as far as it's gone? This gestation period has taken it thus far, and maybe it hasn't got what it takes to go any further. So for some Leos, there is just a little bit of a crisis surrounding a love affair or some kind of creative project. Now, of course, the moon in the 11th house throws the focus on enterprise and group participations as well. And what is this time of year if it isn't all about gathering together with people for celebrations? And also, of course, we often work in teams when we're at work with groups that we work with. We join groups, we're part of a team. And so this full moon breeds a little bit of a crisis when you're involved in any kind of collaboration. Is it the kind of crisis that leads to growth? Absolutely. Or is it the kind of crisis that says, we just can't do this anymore? You'll have to find out when you get there. Remember, the moon is temporarily in this position. It's about a 3-day period. And so it gives you an opportunity to perhaps consider, do I really belong to this group? Is what I'm pursuing here what I hope to find fulfillment in? Is it working? Is it all right for me? Only you can answer that. But it gives you a kind of little point at which you can make that kind of assessment in preparation, maybe, for doing something a little bit more active about it at a more appropriate time. If we come to Aquarius, we've got the opposite going on. So we've got the moon in the 5th house, a temporary 3-day transit, and we've got the sun in the 11th house. Now, Aquarius, you are an 11th house character. This is the area ruled by Aquarius. So it brings out all your humanitarian spirit, all your sense of the world is a big place. Surely we can all come to some kind of understanding here. Aren't we all brothers, or aren't we all sisters? Isn't the sisterhood greater than we, the individual? Yet at the same time, in this period of time when the sun is moving through the 11th house, and collaborations and group work and group consciousness, of course, are all right in the center of life, it is both an opportunity to give heart and soul to it and to join new groups, to form new collaborations, to polish up and tidy up, reconsider, even consider starting an enterprise or getting something really rolling. The sun is helping you do that and helping it to be your focus. When you come to the full moon on the 8th, the day before and the day after, then you're going to see perhaps some of the things that really aren't working with this idea, this plan, with your kind of, ideas that you thought you'd be in a collective setting and that you were all one and one for all. Suddenly that isn't quite what's going on. Maybe you feel left out of the group, or maybe you feel that the group ethos isn't what it should be. So there's a little bit of a crisis here at the time of that full moon. And it probably centers on, and this is worth thinking about, your ego. We all have an ego. We must have an ego. If we don't have an ego, well, where are we? But it's just how important that ego. Do we over-ego the pudding? Do we over-egg the pudding or over-ego it? We have to remove our ego out of this mix. It doesn't mean we have no value for ourselves, or our voice doesn't matter. It's just that is that overwhelming the situation? So we need to step aside, put the ego to one side, and think about the bigger picture. And that'll be some good advice for you around the time of this full moon. So on to our final group, the cardinal signs. So here we go with Aries. Now, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, it's the first house of the zodiac. If you've got Aries rising, it's going to be the same. Then every full moon really is in its natural house, sort of thing. So that we have the moon in the third house of your solar chart, or your chart if you've got Aries rising, and you've got the sun in the ninth house. So let's look at this transit of the sun in the ninth house first of all, because this has been going on since around the 22nd of November, and it will go on until just before Christmas. So what is this area of the chart? It's all about far horizons. So that's far horizons in terms of what we're looking out on our life and thinking, what's out there for me? And there's also the idea of far horizons, really and truly. So foreign places, people at a distance. It's also, as I said when I started this video, the third and the ninth house are seeking houses. We're seeking to find, to discover something in these houses. So this is a period of discovery for you as well, while the sun is moving through the ninth house. And maybe you're sort of planning to go away for Christmas and you're getting tickets and are making arrangements that fits in with this transit. Or maybe you're thinking about going away next year, your holidays or whatever it is, and you're getting all those arrangements in place. Maybe talking to people who are coming over to stay with you at Christmas and the New Year. So there's a great sense of getting things together in a rather nice way. There's a kind of upbeat feel to this ninth house. And maybe you're learning a lot as you go through this period of the year. So we get to the full moon, and as always with a full moon, things come to a tipping point. They reach a head. And once they've reached a head, then they can be dealt with and moved on from. And that's very important. Remember, Aries, this full moon is conjunct Mars. It's contacting Uranus, and it's squaring Neptune. So in the heat of the whatever it is, you are prone to making misjudgments and mistakes and misreading things. So be very careful around the time of this full moon that you don't go off at a tangent and cause the demise of something that doesn't have to come to an end. It's just things got out of hand. You let emotions run the day rather than logic or your bigger self looking at it from a much larger perspective. And if you are making a journey, and of course we can make journeys in miles and experience, but let's say a journey in miles, often that journey is a little bit more stressful on a full moon. So give yourself plenty of time for journeys. Neptune is in the mix. You're easily going to forget something, or if you don't know where you're going, you need a good sat nav and a map so that you don't lose your way. So all these things are manifest, particularly about that time of the full moon. But one last point about this full moon, and that is that it is a good time to sign contracts. Long-term contracts, or to put your signature on something that's going to take you through years, if you like, certainly a long period of time. Full moons, closure and completion, signing on the dotted line. If we come to Libra, we've got the sun moving through the third house at the moment. So this is a time when you're doing a lot of local work. Maybe there's a lot going on in your neighborhood, so you're here, there, and everywhere. You're up at the high street, you're at the school organizing the duty play, you're off somewhere else organizing something, you're part of something, and it's all pretty localized. But it's also a learning thing. You remember a seeking house, it's a learning time. So maybe you are cramming for an exam, or you're going to take a test of some description, and you've got to be, match ready, so to speak. Or maybe you're using social media a lot, maybe even taking a platform and putting across your ideas and feelings. And it is a really, really good time to share ideas with other people, to get other people's take on it, and to build that into your planning. it is a time to use your voice. And sometimes I think at Libra, you want to make sure everything's all right before you do that. You've got to be sure that your voice is going to be appreciated. But you've got a lot of time. You've got a month with the sun moving through the third house. So plenty of time to prepare your speech and prepare whatever it is that you want to get heard, you want to get answers for. So we look at this full moon coming across through the ninth house, and we get the same kind of thing. We get the culmination of something. So a negotiation is completed. We get the idea that something has reached the point at which it can't get any bigger. That's it. So maybe it's the end. Could be a happy ending. It's done. You've taken the exam. You've done your talk. You've done all the arrangements. The preparation is over. We're ready. So it's completed. But again, rather like Aries, you've just got to be careful how these things come to an end when you've got Mars, Uranus, and Neptune involved. These 3 days, 7th, 8th, 9th of December, could be a little volatile and a little kind of edgy. So being prepared for that means that you can go smoothly through it. And remember, in fact, what I was saying to Scorpio, really, I think it was Scorpio, negotiate. Negotiation is good with this full moon. Never forget you have an option to do that. So our last two signs, Cancer and Capricorn. So for Cancer, the sun is currently moving through the sixth house. So we've got this area really, which is a strange area. A lot of astrologers don't really know what to do with the sixth house. And I think if you're learning astrology or you're an astrological junkie, you're kind of confused about this house. Work, well-being, health. How does all this fit together? How is my health and my job? Tell me. Well, it isn't just about that. Like all these mutable houses and mutable signs, they're about seeking something. And in the sixth house, we're seeking a purpose. We're seeking to not necessarily find our purpose, but to be of purpose. So we want what we do to be appreciated. We want to do things for others. We want to fulfill our duties, and we want to really do things in a way that we feel good about what we're offering in the way of service to others. And of course, in many ways, the sixth house is about our purpose and our value in terms of what we do, the respect and the duty we have to keep ourselves healthy. So this is why we get health in this area of the horoscope. So while the sun is moving through the sixth house, it's an opportunity, really, Cancer, to do a lot of stuff related to your health, your dental checkups, any kind of injury that's causing you problems. You've got a snuffle. Is it the start of something else? Deal with it while the sun moves through the sixth house. It's the same really with work. It's like putting in the infrastructures in something. And if you get the infrastructures right, then everything is going to be fine. It's like, is your system, your health system great? Then you're going to be fine. So putting in systems of any description is what we do in the sixth house. And once we do them well enough, then we've created a structure which can support us. So coming to this full moon, remember the moon is now in the 12th house. So in those 3 days, the moon through the 12th house means all things that are rather obscure. This is a house where nuance is important rather than the full facts, the full glare of the light, as it were. It's nuanced, it's intimated, it's hinted at. So while the moon is in this house, you may get all sorts of very interesting dreams, or you may find that you're sort of wandering off in your mind and something's coming to you. You've got some understandings. You may even feel that you're very psychic. Remember, this moon is hooking up to Neptune, so it's inflating those Neptunian 12th house Piscean kind of qualities. But of course, a full moon brings things to a crescendo, to a tipping point. If your health isn't so good and you've got that full moon, then you're probably not going to do too well health-wise at this time. So before that time, and you've got plenty of time if you're listening to this video, make sure that your health is in good shape. because then the full moon can go across and maybe you'll just feel a little stressed out, you know, a little overwhelmed by what you have going on at the time. And that does sort of make us a little bit unreasonable. And perhaps we do exaggerate the negative as opposed to the positive. But also full moon, let's not forget, that's also closure and completion. So a lot of good things can be done and dusted at this time as well, whether it's related to work and health and all those things that I've just been talking about. So for Capricorn, the sun will come into your sign on the 21st of December. So it's in preparation. It's coming through your neighbor sign of Sagittarius, through your 12th house. So this applies if you've got Capricorn rising. And while the sun moves through the 12th house, it's a kind of period of time where we might feel a little bit confused about things. You know, what did that person mean? What does that mean? I don't understand. This thing just slipped through my fingers. You know, what's going on? I'm being left out of the loop. So it can be a very blurry world when you've got the sun moving through the 12th house. But it's a kind of powerhouse, because it's where the unconscious mind, it has rulership over the unconscious mind. So a lot of things to do with that realm of experience, dreams, imaginings, creative imagination, the spiritual world, our spiritual nature, all of this is really being illuminated by the sun. So it becomes a time where we prepare inwardly, we acknowledge our spiritual selves, we acknowledge the health of mind, body, and spirit. We honor it. So we do things like yoga and meditation and take time out to recuperate and rest. We nurture ourselves. We take things a little bit more slowly. So that's this long transit of the 12th house. So come the full moon, 7th, 8th, and 9th, but of course it's on the 8th itself, then all those sort of things come to a head. So if we have been unsure about something, we don't really know what's going on, that's going to mark the peak of our anxiety about that. And maybe that's a good way of looking at it, and that you may feel a little bit more anxious and those kind of rather more negative feelings at the time of the full moon, but they're transitory. And they're not going to last forever. They may only last for a matter of hours or 3 days at the most. But if you tell yourself this is a transitional period, it's because of the full moon, then you will pace yourself better. You won't overreact to things that really, you know, don't mean anything. We are a little bit more likely to listen to the voice of our hopes and fears when we've got a full moon like this one on the 12th, 6th axis. And we simply have to say to ourselves, it may not be real. Let's wait until reality comes to town and then we can really see what's going on. So that takes me right through all 12 signs, and it is time for my conclusion. So I brought a few notes here just in case I lose my way. I don't usually lose my way, but I can sometimes. And what I want to start with on my conclusion is that at the time I'm recording this, it has been a very, very big week for the world. It's certainly been a very big week astrologically. It was the week of the 7th of November. So we had the total lunar eclipse. We had all those kind of angles to Uranus and Saturn. And we had such a big week. I mean, to remind you a bit about that, Ukraine retook its city of Kherson, and at the same time, the midterm elections in the US happened, and everybody thought that the Republicans would give the Democrats a drubbing, but in fact, that didn't happen. In fact, it was rather the reverse. So a lot of things, were, changed during that period in a way that people didn't necessarily expect. So the reason that I'm bringing this into the arena is that with astrology, there's a tier of meaning to everything. There's absolutely nothing essentially good, or there's nothing essentially bad about anything in astrology. It is what it is. So you have these important alignments, and let's take another analogy. One man's meat is another man's poison. So what turned out to be great and good, for some, a real turnaround, a real breakthrough, was turbulence and upset for others. Same alignments, different edge of the same story. And that's what we look at in astrology. We can see the time, we can see what's going on, but there'll be very different expressions of those principles. I'm thinking too about 9/11. I remember when I looked at the chart of 9/11 when it had happened, and I thought, well, this is a terrific chart. Why is this such a great chart when thousands have lost their lives and it's, we're at war, war on terror as it became. But then, of course, I forgot that I should be looking at this from the perspective of bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, for whom it was a triumph, an absolute triumph. So that's something to bear in mind when you're doing astrology or whether you're with an astrologer. Same alignments, they mean what they say they mean, but the taste, the experience is going to vary from person to person. It's also about your perspective. And one of the things that, I look at, if you like, when I'm doing my astrology for all of you, I look at it on the global stage, I analyze global events, but I'm also interested in individual lives, which is why individual people consult me, and I'm always looking at natal charts of individuals. The story is the same, really. When we come to think, everything is about the journey. It's about the journey we make through our own lives. And it's about the journey we as humanity make. And that's what the astrology, the planets in their cycles are really reflecting. It's our journey. So what we are endeavoring to do as we go on our journey, both as a collective and as an individual, is that we meet these crises, these turning points of our lives, and how we handle them, how we respond to them makes all the difference to how we meet the next crisis or the next great opportunity. And fundamentally, it comes back to our level of awareness, our level of consciousness, our ability to stand back, see a bigger picture, see more options. Individually, collectively, we start to change the pattern of history, and we start to change the pattern of our individual history at all. Ultimately, it's all about choice. And sometimes I get a little bit concerned about people who think astrology is, black and white. There it is. It's all in the stars. Nothing we can do about it. Whereas, in fact, that's not it at all. The stars light our way forward. They are our reference point. They show us where we are. And we make the choices which give us the next turn of the way. So those are my thoughts on this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. And of course, as always, if you love it, please subscribe to it and please share it and tell your friends. After all, what we want more than anything else is to support and promote good astrology. Bye for now.